Right, so here we are with New Player Traps Part 2. And to kick this off, we're going to start it with Waveform. Genuinely can't wait for the comments on this one because the amount of people that cried when I mentioned Memento being a trap was hilarious. So yeah, let's start this with Waveform. Right, first things off, the one thing that no one seems to get is it is skill damage, not total skill damage. I'll get to that bit in a second. Secondly, it's one stat, 30%, and it's divided by 2 skills. So 30% between 2 skills gives you an average of 15%. Already, this is probably not looking as good as a lot of people think. If we then add into the fact that it's a 40-second rotation, to go from 0 to 30 takes 10 seconds. Skill 1 is in at 30 for 10 seconds. From 30 to 0, another 10 seconds. Then skill 1 stays at 0 for 10 seconds. Rinse and repeat. Skill 2 is on the opposite. So while the one's building up, the other one's building down. When one's at 30 for 10 seconds, the other is at 0 for 10 seconds. Due to this oscillation in skill damage, it works out to a 15% average. However, there's one thing that no one ever takes into account. And by the way, before someone mentions it, yes, I'm aware I'm not running Waveform in the background footage just because I don't have a build for it. Anyway, the thing that no one takes into account is, do you have that damage where you need it, when you need it? More often than not, the answer is maybe. So now you're adding RNG into your build in a very heavily RNG game anyway, which means that your overall damage output when using Waveform on a skill build is not as good as people think. It is always funny when people go, but Waveform is like the skill build meta. 1, there is no skill build meta. 2, if there was, it wouldn't include Waveform. The idea of the meta is to remove RNG, not add more into it. So no, Waveform is not skill build meta. It's mediocre at best. It's not particularly bad, but there are better options. Just to show what I mean by the oscillation, as well as how much you actually really are getting, although it says 30% skill damage, just gonna let this run around here. So at lowest we're hitting 121,485, and the reason I mentioned it's just skill damage and not anything else like total skill damage, etc., is as this now builds up, which it's doing now. Hurry up, take your time, Jesus Christ, it takes so long. How's everyone doing, by the way? We good? Cool. Right, at max, it's 136,301. This is a 12.2% increase in our overall skill damage, and that is just one skill going from 0 to 1. If we were to run a build like this with Waveform, the total amount that Waveform actually gives us with that 30% skill damage is 6.4%. Now, just to show what I mean of do you have that damage where you need it, when you need it, is just say, for example, our turret can't shoot the target, but our drone can. As Waveform rotates round and we lose that damage on our drone, there we are, guess how much we get now? So yeah, Waveform is not, it's not that it's bad. A lot of people seem to think when I do these things I'm just going, oh, it's bad. It's not. It's meh at best. Waveform is generally considered to be somewhere between pretty bad and meh. So yeah, it's not really good, it's not really effective, it's not really best in slot. It is definitely 100% not meta. It is just meh. For example, if you were then to swap on your typical build like the one I just showed earlier and put on a Wyvern holster, on that style of build, you're only going to be losing out on less than 1% damage over what Waveform would give you, but you completely remove the RNG of it so that all of your damage is completely stable. 100% of the time you have all of your damage where you need it, when you need it, all of the time. You're going to do 1% less though. Oh no. Up next is a weird one. The top right is a DPS build, the bottom left is a tank build. Admittedly, it is a tank build spec'd into doing DPS and is designed for solo legendary, so obviously it's going to do a bit. However, what one looks cleaner, what one looks more efficient, what one looks generally better, what one at one point actually takes basically no damage, and the other one I actually have to completely reposition and realign myself because I'm about to friggin' die. Yeah, and what one's already done, so let's just watch more of the tank build struggle, shall we? Okay, in general play, solo, group, etc, etc, for PvE, tank builds don't really have a place. Even in like legendary missions, you are better off not having a tank. Yes, they can be of use. However, whatever it is you think you can solve with having a tank can also be solved a lot more efficiently, easier, quicker, better, with more burr. Just throw more bullets down range with more damage and you typically solve the problems. This is not to say that tank builds are bad. They're just not as optimal as a lot of people think. Oh, if only we could just like have a tank here to help us survive. If only you just did more damage and you killed things. Typically in this game, it is quite literally your best defense is your offense. Okay, enemies don't shoot back when they're dead. It's a very peculiar thing, but dead bodies don't shoot. There are certain parts in the game where a tank is useful, such as the raids. You have key tank, you have stagger tank. I think that's basically it, to be perfectly honest. But generally speaking, tank builds aren't really all that. I do believe that there are some uses for tank builds in some legendary speedrunny type strats, but they're not there to do damage. They are there to draw aggro. They have to get from one side of an area to the other while staying alive, while their teammates do the pew 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 and the bang bang bang. That's basically it. Up next, we have just exotics in general. I can't find the source of it, but I've heard several times of people saying that the development team didn't actually want exotics to become best in slot, like an exotic meta. And I can actually, anyone really can see this, because typically there's only really 3 exotics that genuinely stand out as sort of top performers. Coyote's Mask for more crit chance, crit damage, both, as well as it buffs your team. There's not really any downside to this. Dodge City Holster, the ability to either one-shot entire groups, a specific ad, or instantly break or crack chungers, warhounds, etc, etc. And Regulus, this sadly is probably the most meta-defining weapon in the game. It's the highest DPS, it's the highest burst, it's the highest sustain, it's the highest damage single shot weapon outside of things like Nemesis. It can completely annihilate group spawns. Pretty much every other exotic, you have to sacrifice something to get something. Memento, you actually sacrifice a hell of a lot, weirdly. Waveform, you sacrifice the ability to actually control your damage. Catharsis, you sacrifice your frigging health, because in order for that thing to work, you have to take damage. There are so many exotics in this game that, by and large, when you actually get down to the nitty gritty, are mediocre. And I'm not going to say the word bad, but they are just mediocre. In order to get XYZ of this weapon that may or may not be worth it, you have to sacrifice things that are worth it. So don't put too much stock in a lot of exotics. Most of them are completely outperformed by just standard high-end pieces, and if you start working on things like certain DPS builds, things like strikers, negotiators, there's not really a lot of room for exotics in a lot of the top-end builds with these. They're typically Fox's Prayer and Pristine Example 4-piece strikers. There's your top-end DPS. Or again, 4-piece negotiators with a Cheska backpack and Pristine Example. There's your pretty much your meta negotiators build. Exotics aren't all they're cracked up to be, so don't believe the hype. And the final trap I've seen a lot of new players coming into is the SHD grind. Don't be in a rush. Yes, people who are over 1,000 are going to be, depending on the build they're using, between 12 and 31% more powerful than you. However, you can quickly make up this gap just by hitting 60% crit chance as quick as possible. However, in the same vein, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So relax. Enjoy the game, enjoy the grind. There's going to be a lot of it, especially if you stick around for a bit and play this game for as long as a lot of myself, other veterans have. The last thing you want to do is smash it all out in a week, get everything you want, and then just sort of be like, well, now what? Because then you're going to be in the same place that a lot of us are, which is, what the hell do I do with myself now? Well, that just about does it for this video. I do hope these are helping some of the newer players. However, in the meantime, have fun, good luck, and don't die. It's bad for the health.